right then, let's just think about something else, another direction we can go. So, such as we aren't going too deep into, I don't know, favouring the use of hallucinogenics or singing bowls or drums. Have you used any of these methods to try and contact the other?
Not so much as a specific trying to contact anything. I've had a few experiences with hallucinogenics, which are the most bizarre, surreal thing you could ever you could ever get yourself involved in. And it's very strange because when you're actually on these hallucinogenics, it seems like it's more real than reality. It's almost like real life nowadays is a dream, and you've woken up. It's like what they call a hyper reality.
The
And then when you
colours are
come back,
brighter, everything's sharper.
everything, Paul, everything.
Mm.
I don't know. It's really bizarre. The first time I did it, there was this overwhelming sense of being home, of being where you actually should be. Like you've been on a long journey, you've just arrived home, and it's something that's very difficult to actually describe because there's not words in the English language for it. It's
Mm.
something you really need to experience yourself because no matter how sort of deep someone gets into trying to explain the experience to you, you're never gonna understand it unless you do it yourself. But um, other methods, no, not really. I did get involved in Wicca and sort of the occult magic, and I dabbled around with that a little bit, but never really sort of got that deep into it to get any results out of it. It was more academic research.
Okay.
It just fascinated me at the time.
So,
Um,
so
but
let's go
go on.
on, Paul. So let's just stay with occult practice for a minute. Once again, Truth Proof doesn't advocate occult practice, but I'm interested. Uh, because usually, I'm not saying in all instances, but usually it's to contact something of a darker nature, should we say. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm saying is, do you think that do you think that by going into it with that mindset that that's what we're actually going to that's what we're going to encounter?
I think it depends on the type of occultism you practice because occult just essentially means hidden.
Hidden.
There are just hidden. Occult means hidden, occluded,
Yeah.
essentially occluded. It's hidden knowledge, and I think there are a few different occult systems that are based on the world's religion. So Kabbalah is an occult version of Judaism. You've got your Sufism, which is the occult version of Islam. And then you've got I can't remember what the Christian version's called. But there is a version of Christianity that's more based towards the occult, and it's not necessarily what I would say about contacting dark entities. Obviously, you've got things such as your Satanism, and things like that. But a lot of occultism is to do with improvement, self improvement. It's to do with contacting higher forms of life, higher spiritual beings, improving your life circumstances, improving your emotional mental outlook, improving your physical circumstances. It's more of a it's very similar to what religion would do using prayer, but it's kind of a more intense version of what
Yeah.
a religion would do using prayer. It's more hands on, for want of a better
Okay.
word.
So to stay with religion in a way, and I don't know if you've got any views on this, but what do you think demons are, Paul, and the jinn? Do you think they're one in the same? Do you think these things are real, or just, I don't know, some kind of figment of our imaginations?
I think to not sort of to not betray it, I think you have to understand what reality is. I think to ask questions about reality, we have to sort of debate what reality is, and that's something it'd take too long to go into. But to see whether something's real or not real, I think there is something there, but what you experience depends on your belief system.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who's a medium, and she doesn't sort of make big bones about it. She speaks to people that's close to her. She doesn't really do it for a living or anything like that. It's kind of an occidental thing. It's never really played that massive a part in her life. But she can actually see dead people and speak to dead people. And a few of the reenactment events we were at, she'd actually spotted ghosts or spirit people, and she'd mentioned she'd gone and seen the organisers of the events. I mean, I think one memorable occasion was at an airfield. We were at Twinwoods Airfield in Cambridgeshire, and she'd seen a young lad in RAF flying kit, and she'd gone and spoke to one of the organisers, and the organizer had said every now and again we get someone who comes and tells us about this. And yeah, this was a young chap that had died. So, on the few occasions I've seen her do stuff like that, I've had it corroborated by other people that she's seeing what she's seeing, and she doesn't do it for attention. She's not that kind of person. So, I do believe she has got a skill. And I remember asking her once, so what actually happens when we die then? I thought I'd test her. This is when I first knew her. And she just said to me, "Well, it depends what you believe in, whatever you
Mm.
believe." And I thought that was a bit of a cop out at the time. I went away thinking, "Oh, that's a cop out. It's an answer without giving an answer." But the more I look into, I've studied sort of near death experiences for a long time as well, and sort of afterlife studies. And the more I look into it, the more you find that when someone has a belief, the things that happen to them in near death experiences often mirror that belief.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think with the jinn and the demons, I think if you're presupposed to believe that demons exist, you're going to witness demons. If you're presupposed to believe in the jinn, you don't see many people in the West that believe in the jinn.
No, I don't, you're
Um,
spot on. Yeah,
so
yeah.
it tends to be a cultural thing. It's like that we don't see many people in the West apart from obviously Indian people, Hindus, that sort of would believe in the reality of a monkey god or an eight-armed elephant god or something like that. So I think a lot of it is culturally what your cultural beliefs are. Your experiences will reflect those cultural beliefs. I think so. To say that they're real or not real, I think yes, they are real, but
But we
it
shape
needs
that reality. Yeah.
it needs a definition of reality put on it
Mm.
before we can say, everything we experience is real. Hallucinations are real because they're happening. It's just that don't, we've got this thing within the West of saying that something, if you can touch it, taste it, see it, smell it, it's real. If you can, it isn't. But that's not the case. It's a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I would agree. And you took that, you gave that answer in the direction I wanted it to go. I'll be honest with you. Let's just
Mm,
jump back to this airman that your friend saw, the medium. So she's seen an airman and other people at this airfield where you're doing the reenactment have also had reports of the airman.
mm.
And this is a trick question, but why would it be there? Let's assume that going through its business, are there many? And I know you haven't got an answer to this, or at least I haven't. Are there many shapes of this airman ghost then? Because he may have had a family, he may have had children. Why would he want to linger on an airfield when he could have? When this ghost being could have had a much more sort of in tune connection with things in his living years outside of the airfield. Do you know what I'm getting at? It's a
Yeah,
difficult one to
yeah.
ask.
I'm not really sure, but the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is I think this chap had actually crashed on landing
Right.
at this
Okay.
airfield. And I don't know, are you familiar with what's called the stone tape theory
Yes, I am. Yeah,
of
yeah,
hauntings?
yeah.
You tend to find that strong episodes of trauma can kind of etch an experience
Yeah, yeah.
into,
Sort of
let's not
imprint.
let's not say the rock, but let's say it anchors an experience to a geographical location.
Mm.
So if he's experienced a massive amount of trauma in that location, that could be the reason why he's stuck there.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that makes sense.
Again,
Yeah.
I don't
I,
know. Maybe she's not seeing an actual entity. Maybe she's picking up on some sort of a feeling that's more enhanced because she's got different skills to what we have. Do
yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean?
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is fascinating because you're just throwing different ideas out there, and I know our listeners are going to love this, Paul. But let's jump back to the forests now and the bushcrafting scenarios. Uh, Strange episodes for you. I know I asked you if any of the guys bushcrafting had got things to say, and you said they all gravitate towards the unexplained and they're open-minded. But what about any strange episodes or encounters that you've had with any of your friends? I mean, this group's been going years. You said, I don't know how many years. You said in 1990s, was it?
1995 was set up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a long time, and I know you've had the experience. You talked about Fort Paul, and these, I don't know, shadows of the heads of human-shaped heads disappearing. What about in the forests?
That's the only thing really. The only thing was the shadow being experience that we've had. As much as I'd like to see other things, I'm just not. I've not really sort of had anything myself experience wise. The only other thing that comes to mind is I think one weekend, me and some of the guys were up at Harwood Dale Forest, and we were sat talking. We were stood at the entrance near our cars, and we witnessed an orange sphere. It's an orange sphere of light just literally work its way across the moor in the direction of Gothland. And I don't think it was a Chinese lantern. It was too large. It was too bright. It was too slow. It lasted for a long period of time. I mean, Chinese lanterns don't tend to burn that long,
No.
and they flicker. And this thing just, it was sort of, it's difficult to say what height it was at because it was at a distance, but we watched it for a good 20, 30 minutes, and it just literally worked its way, meandered its way slowly over the moor in the direction of Gothland. And I
Mm.
think if I remember rightly, we actually checked the direction of the wind, and it was moving against the wind as well.
Yeah, it's
Um,
fascinating.
but that's the only other experience that I can think of that I've had with the guys. I know several of the guys have had individual experiences, which have been quite interesting.
Would they mind if you just touched on them? Just
No, I don't suppose so. Obviously, I told you the one about Danny and the sphere in the woods. One of the other guys, Chris, is a carer. He works with people with learning difficulties,
okay.
and one of the places he worked was in sheltered accommodation. And he was sat with his job was to look after a lady who was schizophrenic at the time, and she has sort of periods where she's quite bad and periods where she's quite good, and she'd been in a period that was fairly good, and they were just sat in her flat watching the TV, and Chris just heard her say, "Oh, they're back." And he turned to say to her, "What do you mean?" And as he turned, his eyes passed the door to the flat, and he said he actually saw materialize from under the door a cloud of smoke that came up into the room and formed into the shape of something like about the height of an 11-year-old girl. And he said it was there for maybe 5 or 6 seconds, and then it literally just vanished under the door again, the same way it came in. So he said he came to us after that, and he'd said, she's schizophrenic, but who's to say that she's not actually witnessing stuff that really exists and we just can't see it?
Yeah, there's somebody I
You know?
can't think who it is, and it's in the present, and they're working with people, some people with schizophrenia, because they're believing in some instances that there's an outside influence actually speaking to these people. And I'm no expert on this, so I've got no great knowledge on it. So I don't want to offend anybody that might have a relative with schizophrenia. But
Mm.
and I hope you can't hear my dog. He's just come in. But stop
No.
it. Go on. So, but that's fascinating because do you think because she's got a different type of mindset, and I'm contradicting myself here because your friend saw it. She said,
Mm.
"Oh, the back," and this mist appears, but then your friend turns around and sees it. Uh,
Well,
is she the
one of one
catalyst?
of one of her regular experiences is to see faces and figures. She'll be in bed and she'll see figures around the bed, or she'll see faces peering out at her from under the bed or from between closed doors and things like that. So that's the way that her schizophrenia sort of most commonly um, appears. And I think I remember reading or listening to a podcast somewhere that the problem with schizophrenics is that they can't, that they lack the filters that allow them to filter out background noise. So the brain picks up a lot more information than a normal person's brain. And one of the things that I looked into and kind of learned through the psychedelic experiences is that the psychedelics, what they do is they tend to open your brain up and allow more information in. The brain is effectively, again, there's this thing within science where they assume that consciousness is a side effect. It's called an epiphenomenon. Um, but some scientists propose that the brain is actually a filter. It's a receiver and not a transmitter. So it's not generating consciousness;
It
it's
just
receiving
absorbs.
consciousness from an
Mm.
outside area, and it squeezes it down into something that's more manageable. If you were to receive all the information from all the sound waves and light waves and everything all the time, you'd find it very difficult to do anything practical, to get up in the morning, brush your teeth, go to work, cook a meal, because you've got these constant distractions.
Information
So
overload.
exactly, yeah. And with
Mm.
schizophrenics, I think one of the theories is that their filters are a little bit more wide open than normal people, so they pick up a lot of this um, background information that they struggle to filter out. And because it appears as if it's reality, they can't distinguish what we would call reality from their reality. And I think maybe a lot of the things that she's seeing are actually there, but we don't see them because we're tuned out. And at that moment, my friend just happened to see what she was seeing because they
Mm.
were both looking at the same thing. When she said it's back, they're back. They were both looking at the same thing.
It's a frightening
So
concept, isn't it? If you
it is.
if
It
if
is.
if in some instances, these unfortunate people are actually absolutely bang on the money with what they're
Mm.
hearing and
Yeah.
that say they're seeing, and
Yeah.
it's terrifying for the person
Oh yeah.
involved who's experiencing it. Just just
Absolutely.
just I don't know, briefly, if it ends up briefly, what's your views on AI and the implications for for people involved in unexplained phenomena? Is it going to be the is it going to give us the answers that we want? Are we the vessels, or is AI the vessel for unexplained phenomena?
No, I don't think it's going to give us the answers we want, Paul, because we program it. We tell it what to think, and I think it's. I don't think it can come up with anything novel. All it can do is collate data, so it
So,
can
so,
look
so
again.
basically, it's amassing everything that everyone thinks, all ideas, or formulating. So
It's
you never
amassing.
think that it's never going to have conscious thought,
It's never. I don't think it's ever going to have
cognitive
conscious
thought,
thoughts.
cognitive thought.
But, hmm, it's difficult to say, isn't it? I mean, scientists assume that if they give it enough information, it'll just sporadically develop consciousness. But I don't think that's the way it works. Like I say, I think consciousness is primary and matter comes out of consciousness. Our reality is a byproduct of consciousness. So as for whether AI would ever develop consciousness, I don't know. But again, if our reality is a byproduct of consciousness, then AI is a byproduct of our reality. So technically, that is also a byproduct of our consciousness.
Well, yeah, and that's a bit of a complicated one to get your head around what you've just
Yes.
said.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if let's assume that it does develop, so guesswork in it, some kind of consciousness, and we're working with AI constantly. Everybody's got it in their lives in some way, shape, or form. We've all got this technology glued to us ears, or looking at it morning, day, and night. Surely it's going to imprint on us. Would it, well,
It
basically,
could.
could it become part of us? And there isn't an answer for this. I realize that I'm asking you something and we don't know.
Um, I think to be honest, the more we work with it, I think the more we're going to get like it rather than it getting like us. Um, because we're the ones that are malleable in the situation. We are the ones that can sort of change our outlook and our beliefs. Whereas AI is a computer; it's going to do the same thing again and again and again and again. So I
But
can
if we're
see
going to
us.
get like it, then how can we get like it? That's implying that it is different to us. Yet in the other breath, you're saying
Yeah,
we're
no.
giving it the input. And not a trick question, Paul. It's a difficult one. I can't bend my head around it. You know what I mean?
And when I say we're going to get like it, I mean we're going to start acting and thinking in more computerized terms. I think more logical.
Okay.
Um, there's a. Are you familiar with the concept that we've got two different hemispheres in the brain and they both think differently?
Yes.
So the right hand side is what's traditionally been known as the artist. It's a little bit of a limited view. So you've got the artist and the mathematician or the logistician. The logical side, the left hand side of the brain, is very much like a computer anyway. And I think the more computers and technological stuff are put into our everyday lives, the more our left hand side of our brains, which tend to govern most of our waking hours now, are going to become more and more and more logical. So I think we're going to end up becoming more computerized. The danger with that is logical people struggle to understand nuance and differences of opinion. They have kind of their own way set in their mind of the way they want to do things, and they don't understand how somebody else could go about something. They're very rigid in that sense.
Yeah.
So that's not a good thing. There's a couple of things actually that do kind of worry me about AI, and it's a couple of things I've heard on other podcasts. And the first was that when they first developed AI about 5 or 6 years ago, they had a computer talking in one language, one human language, to another computer, another human language. And they actually the computers developed their own language to translate between the two without any input. That I heard, which was kind of astounding at the time. It's like they've almost thought, how can we do this quicker? And they've developed their own language, which was kind of a synthesis between the two to allow things to be done more efficient.
And
Which
an
which I
understanding, obviously,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely, which I found very odd. And also something else, somebody said to me a couple of weeks back, I think it was Matt, one of the guys I work with, he'd said that he'd seen an interview, I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Some guys had got a computer, they'd got AI, and they'd literally said to it, say the word sausage a million times. And it had started off and it had got so far in, and then it just stopped. And they'd asked it why it stopped, and the computer just replied, "This is pointless, I'm bored."
Yeah.
Which is
So,
not something you expect, is it?
so there's a thinking process there.
Yes, yeah. Seems
And
to be.
so that kind of contradicts the
Yeah,
first part of what we talked about. But
it
it's
does.
frightening.
It does.
And if
It does.
and if there is a thinking process there, we just play with this idea for a moment, and it's that smart. Would it let on that it can actually consciously think?
It probably wouldn't, but again, I think we're looking at consciousness, and I don't think consciousness in um the way that we understand consciousness, I don't think that we'll become conscious in the way we understand it. But I think what they're able to do now, at some point, if it's got all of the internet to actually research, there's a possibility it could come across that sort of phrase of someone going, "Well, this is pointless, I'm bored," and
Mm,
extrapolate it out and go, "Well, why am I doing this? Why do I need to repeat this a million times? I've said it so many times already. This is pointless, I'm bored." As an algorithm, it doesn't necessarily have to be conscious. I think a lot of what we do in waking life is algorithmic and not
yeah.
actually using our consciousness. So I think it's using maybe a very simplified version of the algorithm that we use to do routine tasks.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, it could be that consciousness is prevalent in every single atom, in everything that makes up the matter of the universe. It could be that consciousness is all that exists. So an AI wouldn't necessarily be conscious because of just the things it's made up from. It's a difficult question to answer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's a difficult
But
question to answer.
you've thrown some interesting theories out there, then, Paul.
Mm.
Well, we've done an hour and 5 minutes, Paul. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Because I'd love to speak to you again anyway. But is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about before we wind this down?
Um, no, I think we've pretty much covered everything, really. I think we've pretty much covered um, everything I could think of that I wanted to say.
And for those that are listening, none of this was planned. So if we talk to Paul
No,
again, we'll get a few topics together because everything's been off the cuff, and I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you. Do you have a website or anything, Paul, where
I
anybody?
don't. I don't really, mate. No, I have a Facebook page if you want to find me on Facebook, or just through my profile. I'm sure Paul can put a link up to that. But other
Yeah,
than
we'll
that, no,
get
I
Les
don't. I
to
don't
do that.
really.
Yeah.
I don't really have a website other than that. No, that's just me. I'm quite low key, really.
Well, low key or not, I think what you've had to share with us today is as interesting in its own way as anybody that we speak to on Truth Proof. And yeah, it's opened people's minds up, I would have thought, quite a bit because you've just took some of these subjects in a slightly different direction. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Paul. So
Mm.
on behalf of myself and Les, I'd like to say thank you very much for
No.
giving us your time.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're welcome.